So, again, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to basically let them start doing the talking. And I guess I want to start with some introductions. So, everybody introduce yourself, and I'll start with you on the end there.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I go to Georgia Tech. I'm part of Free Thinkers over there, and Dave invited me to come here. I am a cis straight male, and so I have a long-term girlfriend. We cohabitate at the moment, so she lives with me, and I don't know, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 8 years, and they did have nuns, but they weren't as prevalent as a lot of people would imagine they'd be. Had religious school, had to learn prayer. We went to Mass every Monday morning and chapel every Friday afternoon. And once I got to a public high school, I learned that there's a lot more to the world than Catholic faith and Catholic people. And towards the end of high school, I started dating a girl that was agnostic, and she made me question a lot of my beliefs, and that got me thinking about atheism or agnosticism or whatever you want to call it. And once we transitioned to the sexual realm, if you want to call it that, then that's kind of my final transition away from God. So now I'm an semi-open atheist, and again, I have a long-term girlfriend, and I'm pretty happy.
Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm a fourth-year bio major at Georgia Tech on my way out. I'm also part of the Campus Free Thinkers there and was invited by Dave so graciously. I am a cis female, non-monosexual, and I am a dominant, as in the BDSM term. And I actually found my way to agnosticism through actually science. I was raised in a mix of religious and secularism in my household when I was a kid. But as you can see now that I'm a biologist, when I got into that vein of my studies, I kind of realized that I more so believed in the origin of life through the last universal common ancestor and evolution more so than I did anything spiritual or religious. And as I got deeper into my studies, it really helped me accept myself as a sexual being. Science did, because pretty much all animals, all mammals, most invertebrates, some vertebrates have sex, and it's just a natural part of life. So being a scientist really helped me come to terms with that.
I'm Scott. I am way older than all of you, probably. I haven't seen the school in a very long time. I am a gay male who is polyamorous, and currently my boyfriend is sitting right there, one of them anyway. I am a porn star. Well, star in my own mind. I'm in porn, and I was a former sex worker, and I actually currently work in tech support, in addition to those other hobbies. And I was raised pretty much without religion. I was kind of religious-y until I was about 5, and then I grew out of it. So basically my experience with religion has been more on the outside looking in and seeing how other people's religions have affected my life.
My name is Ashton. I'm a student here at Georgia State. A lot of you guys know me, but if you don't, my family is not religious, but I sort of walked into religion willingly in my early childhood and maintained pretty severe faith up through the middle of high school. So I was about 16 when I started to stray away from the path of Christian righteousness. So a lot of you also know I'm a pretty vocal, sex-positive feminist, and I am very comfortable with my body, with my sexuality, think sex is great, think everyone should be having it regularly. An orgasm a day keeps the doctor away. Had you met me about 7 to 8 years ago, you would absolutely be shocked and appalled hearing that coming out of my mouth, because I was a completely different person when I was a Christian. I have a history of sexual assault, which I'm going to get into more today, which is very directly tied with my religious roots. So that's me.
So I kind of want to start off talking about the most obvious topic when we're talking about religion and sex, and that's the idea of repression and shame. I know that it's a common thread throughout all kinds of religious discussion, but I'd kind of like for you guys to talk about personal experiences you may have and any reflections you have on what religion does to repress people's sexuality and instill shame in people.
I guess I can go first with that. So for me, my personal experience with depression, because I didn't mention this before, but I did have a lot of it when I was young. When I was maybe 6 or 7, about the time when kids start having like sexual feelings or sexual fantasies that they don't quite understand at that age, I remember having some very vivid dominant, submissive related fantasies, and it was when I was a kid, so I didn't really understand it, and I shared it with one of my best friends at the time who was very Christian. I was going to church with her at the time. She was the main reason I was going to church, and she she reacted very poorly to it and said some very hurtful things that made me feel pretty ashamed of myself. So after that, I kind of just, anything else, any other fantasy, any other sexual feelings that came up after that, I just kind of brushed them away. And that continued until I was about 18. So it wasn't until, like I said, when I was 18, went into college, got into a more liberal, less conservative atmosphere, that I was able to open up with that. But religion really, the way religion works through repression, the reason I believe that religion represses sexuality is because basically I feel like they're denying a human's natural right, or a human's natural feeling. It is sex, being sexually attracted to someone, whether it be a man, a woman, any other gender, whatever it may be, is the most completely natural phenomenon on earth. And I just feel like one of Christianity's biggest things is that they tend, and other religions, I shouldn't have said Christianity, I apologize. Most religions tend to repress anything that is basically part of the human existence. They push against what is natural in being a human.
Well, I had sex ed very late in life, as you can imagine, since I went to a Catholic school until high school. And so, I mean, I was probably 13 years old the first time I had even had what some may call the talk. And that was basically, my dad gave me a comic book about sex and let me figure it out myself. I had never heard about anything sexual in school or what was expected of me in school or anything like that. It was just kind of never spoken of. And the first time I had any kind of structured sex ed was probably AP Bio when I was 15 or 16. And so, yeah, I mean, my parents were always very taboo about it. They never explained, what was expected of me sexually or anything like that. It was always just never talk about this, never, do anything like that, and it's always for shamed, so.
Yeah, I know in my experience, my mom, as I mentioned, is an atheist, and of course that caused me a lot of personal strife when I was younger, but I remember when she did have the sex ed kind of talk with me, she told me, you can be open with me if you are having sex in the future, please tell me about it, I will help you get access to birth control, like you don't need to be ashamed of what you may experience later on in life, which I completely rejected at the time because, I mean, I was the girl going to abstinence retreats to hang out with other girls, to get lectured to about older women about how I needed to keep my body under lock and key at all times. My biggest moment of repression was right after I was sexually assaulted. I was 15, going on 16. And I was seeing a guy who I'd been very clear with about my sexual limits. I had kissed him a couple of times, but absolutely was interested in nothing further than that. And after that event, I went and confided in my youth pastor. I was afraid to tell my parents. I figured she would be willing to talk with me about it. I guess it was her and her husband were the main ones. He sat in on the discussion, and I, talked to her about what was going on. And they basically trapped me in a corner about it and told me that something I had done was wrong and that I had sent some signal to this older boy that had made him think that I would want to be sexual with him. And so that I needed to pray about what I had done wrong, figure out what I had done wrong in that situation, pray about it, and that I needed to be very careful about the signals I was sending in the future. At the time, this kind of made sense to me, which is what's so disturbing. I remember leaving that conversation, going from feeling attacked to feeling like I had almost made him do something wrong. And it took me a really long time after that to even feel comfortable with the concept of sex. I was told by another older woman that I trusted a few months down the road that the oral sex that I had been forced to engage in had taken my virginity, and that I needed to go ahead and cope with the fact that I no longer had that. Which, for anyone raised Christian, like, your virginity, especially as a female, is pretty much your most prized possession. So that had been taken from me at the time. I put that in quotes for the recording. So I dealt with a lot of shame and discomfort after that, I guess moving forward into my more sexual years. So by the time I was away from religion and ready to become sexually active, I was still dealing with a lot of those themes that, I had been able to recognize by this point that the treatment I had received by my youth pastor, the different ideals that I had formed during that time were not valid. I knew that, but it doesn't sort of change the psychological, makeup that comes with that kind of situation. So it honestly wasn't until my most recent relationship that I was actually fully comfortable with my own sexuality and able to ask for what I wanted and to be truly expressive in a way that felt good to me. Before that, I would always deal with, no matter who I was with or how comfortable they tried to make me feel, I would deal with a lot of those, voices in my head, the recurring shame and the, just the various things I had been taught during those years.
For me, basically, there wasn't a whole lot of repression when I was younger at all at home. My actual coming out ended up with my mom pretty much coming up to me and saying, "Are you gay? Because if you are, it's cool. I don't care. I just need to know." Most of it wasn't really sexual based. It was mostly people assumed that I was because I made the mistake of telling the wrong person. I lived in a town of 500 people, and all of us went to a high school that was grades 6 through 12 and had 500 people in it max from the entire county. And so she made it her mission to make everybody know. And I spent the rest of high school, from freshman to senior year, running from bullies, never taking gym, because I was told by most of the jocks that if they so much as caught me in the locker room, they would kill me on sight. And this is a school where even the girls hunt. We didn't get Martin Luther King Day off. We got the first day of dough and the first day of buck. So, but like I said, my mom was totally cool. She was always supportive, and she was very encouraging. I think she was more excited that the person I had sex than I was when she found out. And even from a young age, I was allowed to have sleepovers from the time I was 16.
Hooking into something that Ashton mentioned earlier, this idea of women's virginity as kind of this thing to be protected and until marriage, and we call it purity culture. Aside from any of the personal experiences that you guys have had, more generally, do you think that this idea of purity might be harmful, and if so, in what way do you find it to be harmful to either people or relationships?
I think that's up to an individual to decide. I'm not going to tell anyone how to live their sexual life. I think that's for them to determine. If they want to wait till marriage, and that's more power to them. But at the same time, I don't think that that's necessarily healthy for a relationship. And it's up to you to decide that if you want to, remain pure for your own reasons, as long as you can justify it in your mind, then I think that that's reason enough. You're your own person, you can make those decisions. But as a culture, forcing that on people, it's not healthy. And I think that people should be open to making those decisions for themselves because they know their body best, they know their partner best, and it's not up to a priest or a pastor or the culture itself to tell you when you're ready or what's okay to do.
I agree. I concur, but I think that it's actually kind of harmful in the fact that you're tying something that your overall person is pure just to one act that happens one time, the first time you have sex, which it should be special and meaningful, but just because you've had it doesn't make you tainted. And it's kind of unhealthy, as we were talking about when we were discussing this panel, that basically a lot of religion, I'm not going to specifically call anyone out, but they're always like marriage, but yet if marriage is so sanctified, why is it that now 50% of all of them end in divorce? One of those is because people that are intent on remaining pure until marriage, they get married and then they realize that, oh, being best friends isn't exactly the best way to save a marriage.
You mean they don't end because they don't have enough God in them?
Right, right. I mean,
It was I actually just to cut in. I did see an article yesterday about one of the girls in the Duggar family, the ones that had all the 19 kids, or whatever. One of the girls had just got engaged to her boyfriend, and to her longtime suitor, I should say. And they only started holding hands after they got engaged, and they're saving their first kiss for their wedding. And I'm just wondering what you guys think about that, because I mean, we can make fun of that, but I mean, what do you think that does to somebody?
So I feel like especially if you're in a partnership, if you aren't able to express affection or any kind of sexual contact, whether platonic or sexual contact with them, that's not going to be good for fostering a healthy relationship, especially if these people are going to be married and then raise children and have children together and even engage in sex, obviously, before having the children. It's not going to, unless there's some lucky roll of the dice going on, they're probably not, it's not going to go well. That's about as all I can't go much farther than that. I do think the idea of virginity is harmful, particularly because the idea is when you're a child, your father owns your virginity, and then when you're married, your husband owns your virginity. And it's really an issue of sexism in that, especially because most religions in these days are patriarchal and not matriarchal, it is a way for a man or a young man to own a woman's sexuality. And by doing that, he owns that woman, and she cannot have her sexuality for herself. So without being able to own her own sexuality, I don't think it's possible for her to feel secure and have a healthy sense of her own sexuality.
I know that I have a little sister, and I insisted with my mother a couple of years ago that she make it very clear to her that her virginity is not this sort of gift that she's going to be taught that it is. I always think back to my experience that I mentioned earlier and how things might have been different if I had not had those feelings of shame, like my virginity had been robbed of me. I mean, I was too terrified to even tell anyone for several days, so I missed that crucial window of opportunity where I may have been able to even legally do something about it, because my initial reaction was to hate myself for what had happened, and that was an ideal that was taught to me over time pertaining to the sanctity of my own body, which, had been violated, and whether I asked for it or not, it didn't matter. It was still broken. I was still a used car. And so it was sort of, I think we teach girls and guys that having anything to do with themselves sexually or, interacting in that way with anyone else is something that depletes from their value as human beings, which is absolutely ridiculous and can, have consequences ranging from anything from just being sexually confused later in life to preventing someone from getting help that they may or may not need after experiencing sexual violence.
Looking into something that Abigail mentioned, and that I know I've talked about with Patrick before, how important do you think that cohabitation is to long-term relationships, and how do you think that religion has impacted that idea, or how do you think it's affected it?
I think that if you're going to remotely consider spending the rest of your life with someone, that before considering marriage, that you could consider living with them, or I would strongly suggest living with them at first, because there's a lot of things that you don't realize someone does until you spend more than one night together. And it's kind of like, even sexual at that point is that if you haven't done it and then all of a sudden you're doing it all the time after you take those vows or whatever, then there's going to be a huge kind of culture shock that you're going to experience. And so if you ever intend to, spend a long amount of time with a partner or any kind of long-term relationship, then I definitely think cohabitation is important to at least consider. Again, it's up to your individual situation if you think that's the right move. But religion has really kind of stigmatized that in the sense that you can't move in with each other until you're married. And again, it's kind of someone knows better than you, and I don't think that's the right way to take about things, is that your priest or your preacher or your family or your culture knows what's best for you and your partner, and I don't think that that's appropriate, is that it's between you and them to decide, and it's an individual choice, and it's something that needs to be considered.
And cohabitation doesn't always have to be for the rest of your life, as Patrick put it. Partnerships come in all shapes, forms, and sizes. So it could be anywhere for 5 to 6 years till you're 40, and then you decide you want somebody else, or you have multiple partners. It could be any of those things. So the idea of a man and woman cohabitating to start with is exclusionary. But the reason I believe that religion puts such an emphasis on it, especially I know in Christianity it's considered sinful, I think it's because the idea of a man and a woman being together inspires lust, which is considered a heavy sin in the New Testament. So the fact that these two are around each other and there's static electricity between them and lust, and they're going to break their vows and have sex before marriage, which is such a crying shame. So I believe that's why they push cohabitation being sinful, is to not inspire any inappropriate behavior between opposite sexes, let alone the same sex.
Now, you had mentioned patriarchy earlier, and you'd also mentioned your BDSM orientation. When you think about attitudes of dominance, female dominance specifically, what do you think? I mean, how has... I guess there's two different questions you can answer here. How has religion made that difficult to express, or how has moving away from religion made that simpler, or both? I mean,
so moving away from religion made it simpler because it allowed myself to accept my sexuality for what it is. To start with, being in the BDSM community isn't easy because we're still pretty underground. We're not wholly accepted by society because of many misinformations about our sexuality. So moving away from religion simply made that easier because it made me realize this is who I am. I should be able to accept that. But religion... Okay, can you repeat the first question, just so I have it in my mind?
how did religion suppress that desire, or
Okay.
how did it make that difficult to express?
Yes, as I stated before, most religions are patriarchal. So obviously the men are in charge. And being a female dominant, in particular, to anybody, even if I am just a woman who is dominant or bossy or whatever term you want to put that people like to put on dominant women, not necessarily affiliated with the BDSM culture.
I think the word you're looking for is bitch.
That is the one they like to use. Bitch is the one they like to use. I think even if I identify as just a feminist, religion is in stark contrast to that, and it can make you can feel a lot of pressure from any of the, I guess, the patriarchal norms that religion has ingrained upon society. I firmly believe that religion is the main reason why we have such large gender gaps and gender biases, and in particular, being a female dominant, it's especially when you find a new partner or you are with your current partner, it can be very hard to express because they might not always be comfortable with shifting gender roles. And I believe religion is that is a direct consequence of religion.
So, I mean, I know that that of the people in this room, probably only the people on the panel, or maybe a couple of extra people have a BDSM orientation, but I know that we do come in all shapes and sizes in terms of what we want and who we are. The spectrum of human sexual expression, how do you think that religion suppresses that, and how important is it to not have that suppressed? Does that make any sense? Yes.
As each person is explaining their roles, and as you're referring to MSMs, BDSMs, would you please explain for everyone else that may not know what it means?
Oh, thank you so much. My apologies.
I would be happy to do that.
Oh yeah, please do.
So I typically refer to it as SM, but BDSM is bondage, discipline, and sadomasochism, but it's just a large umbrella term for people who have an alternative sexual identity. Is basically the best way to describe it. It's very hard to go into specific details without miscommunicating things. Other than that, yeah.
Well,
MSMs.
MSM is a term that is often used to mean, it basically means men who have sex with men, so people who aren't comfortable with a gay identity specifically, and that's relatively common with people who aren't comfortable in gay culture necessarily. Yeah, I mean, and also feel free to ask if there's any other terms that we use that people might not be familiar with. But
Just pipe up.
yeah, please do. We will also have an extensive Q&A time at the end of the panel discussion for everybody, because we love to answer your questions and stuff. So yeah. So anyway, so for the spectrum of human sexuality, I know you were talking about as a biologist, sexual expression is just part of what animals do. Humans
Yes.
are animals. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Of course. Most vertebrate species, by that I mean have a backbone, engage in colorful displays of mating rituals to try and attract mates. Whether it's a female versus a male-dominant species, either the male will do the display or the female will do the display, depending upon who is going to have the baby. So, for instance, there are these beautiful birds that have a bright red collar around their neck, and they have these big, enormous tails, and they will actually waggle their tails at the female as a mating display, and usually it is the males that have the longer tails that get the female. So, and then there are bonobo monkeys, which are actually, with contrary to popular belief, chimpanzees are not the closest related species to animals. It's bonobos, and bonobos are this primate that engage in a very, very peaceful sexual society in which they have these giant displays of sex with one another to resolve conflict, to celebrate. If two males are fighting, a female bonobo will go in and have sex with one of them to try and calm them down. If one monkey brings in a cantaloupe, they celebrate by having sex with one another because they're so happy they have food. So they have sex with the same gender. They have orgies. They just engage in all sorts of sexual acts, and it's totally normal to them. And chimpanzees, opposite to this, are very violent. They live in small clusters where when one male chimpanzee has multiple females and tries to hoard other females from one another, and they rarely engage in sex for pleasurable or positive means. So, in my opinion, sex is the naturalist thing. All sorts of animals have it in all sorts of different ways, and all sorts of humans have it in all sorts of different ways. So it's important that as a human, if you have something you like that's sexual, you should respect that, and you should be true to yourself in that, because it'll make you happier as a person.
Anybody have anything to expand on that? I mean, that was kind of a big,
Yeah.
it's kind of a big spectrum, a big kind of huge question.
I mean,
but-
I'll pipe in that kind of even stemming back to the idea of religious repression of sexuality. I think one of the biggest issues is kind of being afraid to even come to terms with what you like or what you want, and that's a big consequence of the idea of waiting for marriage and things like that. But even just the sense that you're sort of taught in a religious upbringing that there's really one appropriate way to have sex, and so you don't even really get to even consider any of the others. Personally, I've had some different kinds of sex that I really enjoyed. There's definitely more than just the general PIV sort of thing going on there, and they can be really fun. But it wasn't until I even developed sort of the mental freedom to even start thinking about stuff that I even would have ever realized that. But it may have been nice to, grow up with the sort of mental freedom to even think about any of that stuff beforehand. So.
And for the
Now-
record, PIV means penis.
Oh
and
yeah,
vagina.
sorry.
Yeah, standard missionary lights out.
Yeah, exactly. There are other ways.
Now, in contrast to my upbringing, which, like I said, was extremely free, there were still some things that religion actually did affect me, and I didn't realize until I was much older. I had also mentioned earlier that I'm a sex worker, or was a sex worker. I'm no longer, unless you consider porn sex work, which Usually, most people do. I don't. I consider it fun for pay, but
Well, isn't sex work fun for pay?
not always. With porn, you actually can say no. I'm not doing that. Sex work, not always the case. I'm also into BDSM. I am also a dominant. However, until I was about 21 years old, I had the fantasies, but I always pushed them away because it was like, no, you can't hurt anyone. That's bad. I am a very non-violent person. I have a very nasty bark, as Dave can attest. But the chances of me actually raising my hand to someone without them intentionally inflicting pain on myself or someone that I care about is probably not going to happen. But I had a client who wanted to try the BDSM, and I actually had a serious internal conflict going on in my head because I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing this is what they want, but I can't because it's horrible and it's evil and it's wrong and I'm going to hit someone. And the first time I actually laid a hand on them, it broke. And it was the most freeing feeling I've ever felt. and honestly, it was almost like an orgasm. But like it was really just, I felt free of it because, you know, it's okay to hit someone if they ask you to. If they legitimately want you to, it's fine. If that's what does it for them, that's one of the things that where religion represses things everywhere. They tell you, you know, this is wrong and it's a blanket statement, and that's not true. It's black and white, and there is no gray. It's lights out, missionary, man and woman, end of sentence. When there are about 1,500 million other colors out there, the box of crayons is so huge, and most people are just using black and white, and everyone else is having a hell of a lot more fun. And actually, we're mostly much more happy, too.
That is an excellent segue into the next question I wanted to ask. Up until now, all the questions have been kind of focused on the bad things that religion does, but one of the things that people like about religion in general, it's not just sexual, that religion gives rules so people don't have to think, or not have to think as much about like specific situations. They just have an idea of, okay, this is right, this is wrong. If I don't stray from this, then I'll be doing the right thing. Rejecting a religious identity means that you have to come up with all kinds of your own ethics. You have to answer those questions yourself. So what I'm wondering is, for all of you, what approach have you taken to building your own code of sexual ethics apart from what religion would have ordinarily told you to do? What kind of approach do you take?
I mean, I think we'll all agree that consent is probably the number one most important aspect of any sexual interaction. So my kind of rule of thumb tends to be if I consent, the other party or parties consent, and consent to each different thing that we want to do, then it's okay. There has to be clearly stated consent. And over time, you know, if you've been, you know, intimate with someone for months on end, that stuff, you know, you don't necessarily have to have a clearly formed, yes, I want to do this every single time. You start to understand, you know, body language and things like that. But yeah, generally my rule of thumb is if everyone's happy and, you know, has consented verbally to what's going on, then it's probably okay.
For me, I like the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. They're a national affiliate that helps support people in the BDSM and polyamory communities. I like their slogan, which is safe, sane, consensual. Those are my rules. As long as everybody's feeling safe, we're not intoxicated, there's no blurred lines. There's no blurry lines in there because one of us had been either intoxicated or using, I say illegal drugs or any kind of drugs for that matter. And consensual is then we have both said yes or no, and then if one of us says no after we said yes, it's still okay. Like that, then we can stop at that point and it's fine. Unlike some states which say that there are some states that have a law that says if you say yes to sex but then say no in the middle of sex, then that doesn't matter. It's still consensual at that point. But no, safe, sane, consensual. That's all. That's the rule I live by.
I think it's very freeing to make up your own rules. That sounds weird to say, but like, I mean, you're not born with like a rule book. I mean, people joke about the baby manual or things like that, but I mean, if you want to look to religion as a rule book, then go for it. But not for me, and I kind of make it up as I go, just like I would with my own existence. Is that I don't have to ask someone else permission to be myself. And I mean, consent is a huge factor, as you can imagine. Where as long as both parties are comfortable with it, then go for it. Is that you could write that rule because it's not already written. Is that it's individualized, and you can be yourself without asking God, is this okay, or parish priest, is this okay? But it's just kind of like partner, is this okay? And then you can do that to each other or with each other however you want to, as long as consent is involved.
And for me, I've adopted a pretty Wiccan philosophy, which covers most of my being as a whole, and that's do what feels good, harm none. Basically, my rules are, even if people are intoxicated, which you make sure you agree up front beforehand what's going to happen, and no always means no, regardless of whenever you say it. But other than that, it's whatever anybody wants. As long as we're not going to get arrested or get hurt.
Right.
Or if the safe word is used.
Yeah, or safe word is used.
So
And ouch is not a safe word.
Well, so I guess the question that I'm sure that a lot of religious people would have, then, if the only rule is consent, whatever it is, I mean, what prevents you from just doing any kind of horrible thing that you want just because somebody? I mean,
Define horrible.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's the difficulty of that question then.
Consent stops you. If you're going to hurt people other than you and your partner without consent, then you're going to have to ask someone else. Anyone that's involved. I mean, that's kind of that guideline is that, if we're going to be doing it on a flaming skateboard or something going down Atlanta, then other people are at risk. And I would require their consent in order for that to be okay. But, like, as long as everyone involved is consenting, then, I mean, I don't see how there's anything horrible happening.
I'll say that as a very colorful mental.
Well, I was trying to think of something on the spot. For some reason, flaming skateboards.
I'm going to write a letter to Casino Marine.
I think one of the things is that as human beings, even without the presence of the church, our experiences shape us as human beings. We know what's right and wrong. Unless you have a psychological illness. Most people can develop a sense of what's right and wrong. If you're hurting someone. If what you're doing is going to cause harm. There's this little thing called a conscience. It does occasionally talk. I say I've killed mine, but I haven't really. But in all honesty, I do with whatever feels right. And I know if something feels wrong, then it's probably not a good thing. Mm-hmm. And that I use my gut instinct. We were given it for a reason.
So I guess the last directed question before we get into the Q&A is actually something I did not even bring up when we were talking about this. So this, unlike anything else, you don't even know what's coming up.
I don't want to surprise you.
Okay, so body image and religion is the... It's not even a question, it's just a prompt. I mean, this is kind of like, what do you think it's done either for you or for people or for society? And how do you think a lack of religion affects body image versus having religion?
I'll go first on this one since I'm paid to be naked. Body image is something that I personally struggled with. Obviously, I'm not exactly a supermodel, and most people when I say I'm in porn, they're like, "What? How did you get into porn? And where do I sign up?" The thing is, religion shapes body image in a certain aspect. But I don't really see it as telling you that you have to be this. Because they don't really care what you look like as long as you follow their beliefs. However, body image, for me, I had to get over that. And I had to get over the fact that I'm never going to be thin, ever. It's just not going to happen. It's not the way I'm built. I'm never going to meet society's ideals. And religion, as much as we don't like it, it does shape our culture and our society. And one of the things that religion ingrains into people is that basically most religion turns their flocks into simply that, flocks. Their herds. A lot of people don't really think for themselves outside the confines of their daily lives, and they all generally seem to follow what other people suggest. You know, if Vogue says that you have to have a size 0 waist, 80% of the American female population is saying, oh my god, 80%, oh my god, 0 size waist, here we come. And I've known far too many people that are indeed atheist, or even people that are not atheist, that have had a lot of problems adjusting to society. Most of my friends are females, and very few of them actually fit into our society's ideal of beauty. And I don't really think, like I said, religion so much influences the image of beauty, other than the fact that the Virgin Mary is beautiful in most Christian cultures and that they have specific people. But I believe it's the mentality itself, is that, you know, this is the voice of your higher power, insert higher power here, these are the rules, and anything outside of this, you're on your own. But most of them are guided.
Vogue is God, I like that.
No, Vogue is not God. Anna Wintour is God. Okay. Remember that.
That's true.
So, body image is really important to me. I am in 2 years of recovery from my previous eating disorder. So, body image is still something that I struggle with every day, even after having been in recovery for 2 years. But I can tell you that what I think the link between at least body image and religion is, goes back to women not owning their own sexuality. For me, I know once I gained control of my own sexuality, I felt a lot better about my body, even with my post-eating disorder feelings. That once I had gained control of it, I felt like sexy as hell, and it was great. It was a really good feeling, and it was like for this brief moment, it's like I didn't give a crap about what society expected of me, at least in terms of body image and body ideal and the ideal whatever. And I honestly think it goes back to that religion imposes this idea that women don't own their own sexualities, that it's owned by either their father or their husband or their fiance or whatever. And I don't think that's right. I think that if we get rid of that idea, that if women can start owning their own sexualities, they'll start feeling better about their body.
I will definitely co-sign that. The only real difference, I guess, in my body image or my self-image with religious me and secular me is now I guess I love my body not so much for what it looks like but for what it can do. I had never experienced an orgasm while a Christian. I didn't even know what that felt like until I was a secular person. Now I'm like, hell yeah, like just the fact that I can even do that is like enough for me. Like this body is clearly doing something right. So I definitely think there's a lot to be said with the way that I dress now as well. Before I left the path of Christian righteousness, as I said earlier, I'm not afraid to show a little cleavage now, and that makes me feel sexy. Like that's something that, gives me a feeling of sexual satisfaction. And, before then I would have slut-shamed other women for showing their cleavage because I had been taught that that was wrong. So it's, I guess maybe to sum that up, it's not even so much how I look at myself, but how I view women in general. Like I love any ability by any woman to express herself sexually or to show her body as much or as little as she wants to, whereas before leaving religion, I had a very strict set of ideals about how that was supposed to be done, and it excluded almost anyone that wasn't doing it exactly like I was.
I mean, so I dress reasonably well, and I'm a white upper middle class guy. So I don't know. I seem to fit what most people would consider the appropriate body image for someone of my status. I don't know, but I'm trying to think of sociologically correct ways of going about this. But at least looking at it from a semi-historical perspective, which I'm a history and sociology major, so that's something that I look at. Is that a lot of times, at least in my status. Body image is very much associated with wealth and with power, and so like having a white collar 100 years ago meant that you could pay to launder your collar, you could have your wife launder your collar or iron it, and so like how you dressed was a status symbol, like what barber you went to was a status symbol, and so things like that were more associated with power and money than it was with religion. But I think that there might be a little bit of tie-in when you talk about who's generally in power. And the church had a lot of power back in the day, and religious authorities have a lot of power today even. And so just kind of how you interpret how someone looks kind of goes hand in hand with religion, is because it deals a lot with power.
So that's actually the end of my scripted, my prompts. So I want to open the floor up to anybody who has any questions or any remarks, anything, and I obviously can't see behind me, so you guys are going to have to call on people and everything, but feel free.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about, most of this has been centered on monotheistic patriarchal religions. I mean, most of you have grown up in Christian culture, so obviously that would be heavily influenced, perhaps some contact with Judaism or Islam. But based on, I guess, your own personal knowledge, can you think of any ways that religion may or may empower sexuality in any way? Maybe not necessarily, the one Godders, but
Okay, so the question was, are there ways
which religion can empower sexuality?
yes, in which religion can empower sexuality, especially non-monotheistic religions. So I have a very rich Scandinavian history / heritage in my family. So I always joke that if I were to turn back to religion, I would turn back to the old gods, the old Norse gods. And so far as I know, in Norse culture, sex was not frowned upon at all. In fact, they had a strange gender dynamic in the Norse cultures. Women did have power and were allowed to be shield maidens. They took care of monetary issues, while the men went off to sea to conquer and get treasure, etc., etc. But so there was obviously already a gender equality there. And as far as I know, most of the stories about the old gods, one of the goddesses actually to gain an amulet of power from dwarves. She slept with like 12 different dwarves to get this amulet of power to give her even more divine power. So that story alone makes me believe that there was not so much issue with sexuality in Norse culture. And there are all sorts of, I know about, if you want to go into the, not even the deities, there are also many like legends about Norse creatures. Norse elves and trolls and other things were also known for being very promiscuous and having sex with humans, or luring humans into traps to have sex with them. So I have a feeling that sexuality was not so much of a damper wasn't put on it in Norse culture, at least.
Yeah, and I would say the same for the Greeks, because, well, as we all know, the gods fucked everything.
Yeah.
And I mean everything. In modern times, though, I know paganism, a lot of pagans and Wiccans, there are a lot of sex-positive imagery and tradition and ritual with them. Like, a lot of times they're traditionally naked, and they do have even Satanism itself. And when I say Satanism, I don't mean, they're coming to get your babies. I'm talking about the actual religion.
Theistic or Levian?
Yeah. I've known both. I've known different sects that have people, but I know that both of them, I know that most of them have at least sexual rituals that they perform. Granted, usually they're trying to curse somebody, but it's empowering. I'll say that would be empowerment, but those are the only ones that I'm aware of currently in modern times.
More questions? I mean,
so you asked about religion accepting sexuality and empowering sexuality. My question was in the inverse. If anybody in the room, not just the panelists, where sexuality empowered their religion, or at least their understanding and movement towards it. If not, yeah.
So the question was anybody in the room, either the panelists or the audience, were they empowered by their religion? Was their sexuality empowered by their religion?
Did their sexuality empower their religion?
Oh, did their sexuality empower their religion?
Or at least a path, or as part of their path, their understanding of their religion.
Or their understanding of their
I can
religion.
shoot for that. In a very negative light, I guess.
Zero orgasms to God.
Well, no, it was more of a, once I started, exploring myself, Yeah. Once I came to that point of life, I prayed a hell of a lot more because I was still religious and I was curious and I wasn't sure what was happening. And so kind of those feelings or whatever was something that brought me closer to God in kind of a repress myself kind of way. But at the same time, that's what I knew. And so that brought me closer to my religion.
Did you have the I broke it first experience?
What?
The I broke it. Oh my god, what happened? Did I break it? A lot of my male friends had that. They're like, oh my god, stuff's coming out of it. I don't know what I did.
Yes, I did.
A lot of my friends who were religious decided to pray at that point.
What an interesting verse.
How have you seen religious influence or religious culture influence even your secular partners?
Okay, so how have you seen religion influence your secular partners?
That's a good one.
I know that personally, my partner is okay. So I'm going to go back to the whole me being a female dominant. In religion is directly in opposition to inverted gender roles. So being a female dominant, I invert gender roles, and I know that my partner is starkly opposed to inverting gender roles, despite his knowledge that religion and basically all of society has ingrained this idea of men dominate women rather than women dominate men.
And in my life, my primary partner, who I refer to as my husband, he's from Puerto Rico, from the island. He moved here about 6 years ago, and his family is mostly Catholic, like a lot of that portion of the world is, and his parents are on the church board. His parents are deacons. He went to school in a religious school. He was a pallbearer for like a number of things. He also was an altar boy. So he has that whole Catholic thing going on. So like with me, I'm a total exhibitionist. I don't care who sees what. And with him, he's like, no, because my mom might see it. I'm like, how exactly is your mom gonna see it? What exact? But he's so afraid that anything that he says or does could be caught. And like his mom actually recently talked about moving to Atlanta. That was definitely a fun conversation. But yeah, it's definitely made him. He's willing to do just about anything, as long as no one sees it or there's any chance that his family could ever hear about it, because they would be very, very shameful, and he would feel very bad, because Jesus would not want that.
I was intimate with someone who was actually firmly Catholic at the time. So it's not a direct answer. No, I didn't. Kind of. A little. It's not a direct answer, but I will say he had a really weird aversion to me ever being the one to try to initiate any sort of intimacy. It was like he had this idea like, you're only supposed to want sex when I say we should be having it. And so, this was a very unhealthy time in my life. I would never tolerate that bullshit now. But at the time, it was whatever. But yeah, that's one of the weirdest like religious crossovers into sex that I've ever experienced firsthand.
So my girlfriend's family is religious, and well, so is mine, but we're both very secular in that sense, and so her family kind of has a huge impact on her life because both of us are to a certain extent still financially dependent on our families. And so like when talking about cohabitation or something, well, she basically lives with me in my dorm at this point, but I mean, if we're talking about moving into an actual apartment or getting a house together, then neither family is comfortable with that to the slightest extent. And so it really, I mean, anytime we've ever tried to bring that up with either side, God forbids that, or I forbid that, we're both adults here, and I'm, graduating soon, and I can make my own life decisions. But because of how our families interpret the world and religion, it really limits both our sex lives and our personal lives based on how they view us and how they view God, I guess. And so it kind of makes it difficult for us to advance.
Yeah.
Way back here. Hi. I'm sorry I came in late, but I had a question for you in the red shirt. I don't know how
My name's Scott.
I was wanting to ask, because I know you was talking about the relationship dynamic. Like, how do you feel in that situation, knowing like he has to hide or he has to hold back from his family? Because I know in my family there was this instance where this girl, my cousin was dating this guy, and it turned out she dumped him because she found out he was a non-believer,
Mm-hmm.
that he was an atheist, and she dumped him just solely because of that. So how does it feel to?
So, well, basically, with him and his religious background, well, it's not so much, it's really a non-issue for me. But for his family, it's become kind of an issue because he's kind of chosen me over them, which I encourage him to go see them. I'm not like, you can't see your family. I encourage him to go with him. I've gone with him to family functions. Mostly the family that he has here is accepting. But the family in Puerto Rico, they're kind of accepting. Like, they're nice to me. And that part, like the actual non-sexual part of our relationship, it's perfectly fine and hunky-dory. They don't care. His mom talks to me. His mom says hi. She sends presents for both of us. She does stuff like that. However, if the slightest thing gets like anywhere near the bedroom conversation, then it makes a completely right-hand turn. But I deal with it because I love him, and we've been together for going on 4 years. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's his life, it's his decision. I'm not going to try and force him to be like, okay, I'm going to be confrontational about this. It's not my place.
To be fair, I don't talk to my girlfriend's parents about our bedroom conversation.
Yeah.
I would prefer.
Tend to stay off that topic.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, he won't even refer to it. Like, his mom, recently I got him an iPhone. And his mom apparently has an iPhone, and she's learned how to use FaceTime, which has become kind of awkward because I may have to run at any given time because I don't always walk around the house fully clothed. So, I mean, it's just little odds and ends of things like that. But, yeah, I don't talk to his mom that great of detail. I realize
be
that.
your son, BDSM, good stuff. Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for the secular community to help promote healthy sexual attitudes?
Do it safe, do it often.
Pretty much.
And consent, yes.
I mean, for one thing, host panels like this.
Yes.
Promote heavily. Be tolerant, especially if you're on a panel and talking. You need to be tolerant. Be feminists. That's one other thing you can do.
Something that I really encourage people to do is, especially if you have a religious past, is to really have kind of a heart-to-heart with yourself about what sort of impressions of your current sexuality may have crossed over from when you were religious. I definitely dealt with that sort of like in-between sort of like brackish period where I could never separate like what I actually wanted from what I was taught to want and all of those different things. So if you have any sort of like cognitive dissonance in that regard where you don't clearly know where you stand sexually, it's really important to, I guess, think about what you were taught, what you truly believe in now, and how those things may be crossing over. That was really helpful for me.
I recommend just trying to keep an open mind, think outside the box. Like I said, there are so many different flavors of sexuality, and most religion seems to want to just shape it into that one little tiny box called missionary with the lights out. And there are so many different things. And I mean, just to keep an open mind and be non-judgmental. If somebody tells you something, even if you don't particularly agree with it on a personal level, you should still at least be supportive of them and support their choice. Because at the end of the day, it's all about our choices and how they impact us.
I kind of want to piggyback off of that question, if I may. I watched a great video recently that said that a closet is just a hard conversation. And I feel like everybody represents different closets, whether it's polyamory, abuse, BDSM, whatever. So if you don't mind, can you say what are the hardest conversations for you? What are the most difficult closets, and how do you deal with them?
Okay, so I guess this is closet. Like I said, my closet, my mom broke the first one. That was the hardest because she'd been asking me for a while about it, and I was kind of like, no. And then finally one day she broke me, and I'm like, okay, fine, yes. Now, some of the other stuff, like being a sex worker, that was a really awkward conversation. That's something that I don't like to bring up. I mean, it's not that I'm ashamed of it. I mean, I'm seriously not ashamed. I don't care. Tell your room, total strangers. Doesn't really bother me. But it's more for me, it's the other person. It's how people react and then they treat me differently because they're like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's more than the gay side or the BDSM side or any of them, because unlike Abigail, the gay community is a lot more accepting of the BDSM side. We have a much larger BDSM contingent, and they're actually a lot more vocal. A lot.
I know for me personally, I am the BDSM box or door closet. Which was it?
Closet.
Closet. I lost the analogy. I
BDSM
apologize.
box. That's got to be a website.
Box. Closet for sure. And like I said, I didn't discover it till later, so it's like I'm still figuring out how to talk about this. It's hardest when someone finds out unintentionally that they find something in your car or like in your closet that you forgot that you left there, and then you have to make a conversation. Some of my friends I've talked with that I know I can trust took it very well, and it's very easy to talk to them. It can be difficult with partners because you have no sense of what they think is right and wrong, and a lot of people think that BDSM culture is wrong, that it's violent, that it's sexist, that it's XYZ. And depending upon, say you're getting into a relationship, it can be very difficult unless you know somebody's opinion on it directly to bring that out to them without facing like, oh God, what's going to happen? He's going to think I'm a freak, or he's going to think I want to do terrible things to him, and I do, but I mean in a consensual way. In a consensual way. But when it's most hardest is when someone starts asking you questions, because it's very difficult, or rather, it's very hard to explain why BDSM culture should be accepted and why it's not violent or sexist. So that is the hardest conversation, is telling it to the general, getting it out to the general populace. Or if you're just asked, if I say had come out to just any old person and they wanted to ask me questions, that's the hardest part.
Do you find, I just wanted to ask you, BDSM to BDSM, do you find that if you tell someone that you are, and you're in any kind of relationship with them, they automatically assume that you want to beat them? I get that a lot.
Yeah, so a lot of
they
people
just assume that it's, oh, well, just because you're telling me, you must want to do it with me.
Yes. So I've only had one steady partner currently, but I have talked about it with my friends, not to beat them, but I've like, yes, I am. You should read about the culture, or you should read BDSM erotica or watch BDSM porn to get a better idea of it, or to go find some literature sources. And they'll go, well, I'm not really into being hit, and I could never hit another person. It always goes straight to the hitting.
Yeah, it always goes straight to the hitting.
It's not all about hitting, folks.
I found that with, as Dave knows, because like I said, I'm polyamorous and I have multiple partners. I actually have a dividing line. There are my partner Humberto, who is my main partner. He doesn't mind watching the BDSM thing, but he does not want to participate. He has no qualms watching, but he's like, okay, that's cool. And then we have, I have people that I exclusively play with that are just BDSM. There's no actual sex that occurs.
Play is a term for engaging in BDSM activities.
Yes. There's BDSM play only, and then there's sex, and sometimes there's an intermingling. It's not always,
I'm going to beat the hell out of you, and then we're going to have sex.
Yeah.
It's not always that.
I'm going to fuck you to a bloody pulp. That's not always what's happening.
Yes. As you can see, this is a very difficult topic.
Yeah.
Which that's why it makes it one of the most difficult closets. Boxes.
My closet is also difficult. I had to come out of the, hey mom, that guy that you really hated and didn't want me getting in his car, yeah, you were right. Coming out of that closet was difficult. Facing many of the people who had, sort of my friends at the time, who had sort of jumped on the yeah, you must have just done something sort of bandwagon, addressing them later is hard. And it's hard now. I'm not going to lie, there are definitely moments during oral sex where I have flashbacks and I kind of freak out, and it's probably going to happen to me for the rest of my life. That's a conversation I have to have with men before I do that with them, because otherwise that would be incredibly traumatizing. It's a little traumatizing as it is, but it's incredibly traumatizing if it's not expected. So I'm kind of now in the position where, to be polite, I'm going to need to come out of that closet with any person really that I'm ever intimate with. And then past that, one of the closets I kind of had to come out to with myself was my sexual interest in women. So that was something that I had always felt. It was something I had wanted since I was a kid, but that I had stifled for a very long time. And it wasn't until recently that I actually even began exploring that at all. I can trace a direct tie with the, religious influences in my life that caused me to stifle that desire. And, the ties with secularism now that have allowed me to explore it more freely.
Yeah, I want to add in a quick little blurb about that too. Sorry, didn't
Okay,
cut you
sorry.
off. That is another difficult closet, is being a non-monosexual identity, or either words, not being heterosexual or homosexual. I don't identify as bisexual. I just call myself sexually ambiguous because I don't really know what I am. But it can be difficult to talk to people about it because there are a lot of stereotypes around being non-monosexual, that you like to have sex with a lot of people, or that you think cheating on your partner with the opposite sex is okay, or the same sex is okay, or that you participate in risky behavior. So that can also be difficult for anybody in the room, if there are any, who are non-monosexual identified.
Yeah, after Patrick gets done with his closet, there is something that I want to talk about that hooks into hers.
So I think my closet's more like less related to the bedroom itself and more related to like the relationship. Is that neither myself nor my partner are particularly interested in having children, and we pretty much discussed that we may not ever want to get married either, unless there's like a serious incentive to do so. And so, I mean, talking to especially the religious community, where it's usually like, you will get married, you will have children, and that will be it. And my parents are kind of into that mindset, and they're actually asking about it now, which is terrifying. But the fact that we probably won't have children, or at least not intentionally, that's something that's kind of our closet, that we don't necessarily tell that to people, especially once things are getting more serious and we're moving in together, and I'm getting a job and things like that, where people are like, you're at that stage in life where you might want to start getting married and having kids, but I mean, that's not where we want to go with it. So
Okay, so what I was going to say is, with polyamory and what you're saying about having multiple partners, I would think that one of the other things is talking about the fact that I have multiple partners. That is definitely an interesting conversation to have, because everybody thinks that either, one, I'm a total whore, or that my partner is a victim and that he's being cheated on, or that I don't respect my partner, that I don't love him, or whatever else. And that was one thing, coming to terms with being polyamorous was kind of difficult, because there is still some guilt about telling your partner of 4 years, hey, I met this guy and I kind of like him, and we kind of want to date. Now, I have an amazing partner who's like, okay, go for it. Because we have established, before my current partner, I was single completely. I refused to be in a relationship because I'm so afraid that I was going to hurt someone that I cared about, because I'm not monogamous. Monogamy, for me, is like someone telling me that I can have lasagna every night for the rest of my natural life. Lasagna happens to be my favorite food, but after a couple of days, I think I would get kind of sick of it. So I don't really see monogamy as the end-all, be-all. And that is a really difficult conversation to have.
And if I can piggyback on that for 1 second, Scott and I are dating. I'm also polyamorous, and I had a boyfriend before, and I have a husband, Matt, who I think he had to leave early for something. But so everybody knows Matt and I have been together for 8 years, and I had been dating this guy for a little while, and we ended up breaking up. And I had made a post on Facebook about I just broke up with somebody, and of course people who they don't. I mean, I'm very publicly polyamorous, but people don't often make that connection. It's kind of something that's a middle block, and so everybody's like, "Oh no, are you and Matt okay? What happened?" I'm like, "No, it's not. It wasn't him." Yeah. So that is a very difficult one to come out of as well.
Yes.
In terms of, are you calling on me?
Yeah.
In terms of polyamory, is there a separation of identity for anyone in this room who's polyamorous between emotional and physical monogamy? I feel like I'd be able to accept a partner just going to get some instead of wanting to date.
There actually is a separation. With mine, there is a very, very distinct separation. What separates my primary partner from anyone else is that we have some rules established. 1, I don't ever spend the night anywhere else. Ever. 2, I generally don't kiss on the lips. Except for him. That's his and his alone. Everything else, fair play. But those 2 things, those are what I give him.
I'll just throw in there, but that's not exact. The polyamory community overall, that's not a single set. There are like a lot of primary, secondary, different relationships that are not just sexually based, but are have multiple wives.
Yes.
I'm really close with a married couple who they're heterosexual and married, but they experiment a lot on the side, I guess. So she will, she's bisexual, and so she will have sex with other women, and sometimes they will, have sex with other couples and, invite other people into their bedroom, and sometimes do those things separately. And they actually have sort of a setup that I kind of aspire to, because they have the security in each other and sort of the emotional commitment to each other, which is important to me. I'm a very serious, emotional person, and I can't really fathom having romantic love for more than one person at one time. I can totally fathom having sex with more than one person at one time, or, with other people in the mix, I guess. So that's something that I kind of aspire to, I guess, is to have sort of a relationship set up like that. It's really difficult to achieve. There's a lot of feet that get stepped on in that process, and it can be very emotionally trippy, even just beginning to start thinking about something like that. Sensitivities will just pop out at any given moment, and so it, But there's lots of ways you can go about that sort of construct.
With us, there's a lot of, unlike what Ashton said, I do actually love them, but I love them in very different ways. Humberto and Dave are completely, almost polar opposites. And it's just, I love them each for various different things. And it's like, Humberto and I are one part of a puzzle, and Dave and I are another part of a puzzle. Without it, it's not really, I'm not really missing anything, but it's not complete either. It felt more complete than what it was.
And if I can piggyback on the answer, I actually have a rather different set of lines, because I do distinguish between partners. I mean, the relationship I had before, it was much more of basically, I thought of it as a triad, just because, it's very easy for me to emotionally attach to somebody and physically attached, and they're kind of one and the same for me. So I don't have the same separation there, and I find it personally very easy to love more than one person. So it is different for different people.
Other questions?
Over the course of the discussion, there's been a lot of talks of boxes, and what box you fit into, or what you think you fit into. But me, I know I'm heterosexual, but still, that good analogy about the large box of crayons. Like, sometimes I feel like, one night I want to be cyan, but half the time I'm blue, or red.
Yeah.
I think my sexuality is like malleable, but within that heterosexual box. So I was telling my partner this, and she kind of took it kind of weird, because she's sort of religious. She's kind of on the fence. So how would you break it to somebody? Just like being what was that term for being okay with multiple partners?
Polyamorous.
Polyamorous. Yeah, but I might be that. I have no idea. So how would you break that to your partner? In a gentle.
You just.
I swear I'm not a fool.
It's a hard, that's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Honestly, at the end of the day, you just need to be honest, and you need to be loving and gentle. I would assure her that your relationship with her is still sanctimonious. Like, it's still there. It's always going to be there, that you care for her in whatever extent you care for her, and that you are going through some time to reflect about yourself, and you need to learn to understand yourself better. And then it's upon her at that point to decide how she wants to react. You just have to be as open and honest and loving with her as you can.
And the conversation that I had with Humberto regarding Dave was basically what Abigail was saying, and basically it went that just because I love him doesn't make me love you any less. It's not detracting from you per se. It's just another part.
I've been in the position of what your girlfriend would be in if you express those sort of things to her. And I will say that upon first even having to fathom that sort of thing, I completely rejected it. I was very emotional about it. I had absolutely no willingness or openness to even fathoming it. Taking a step back, and it's even something that I still think about almost on a daily basis where I am now. Some stuff just isn't about you. Some stuff isn't about, it wasn't about me. He was coming to me in an honest way saying, this is something that I'm thinking about. And I took it as an insult. I let it crush my confidence at that time. And it totally, threaded into a lot of negativity later in our relationship. So I think it might be important to frame it in a way like that. Like you just said, it's not about loving you less. It doesn't really have anything to do with her. And that's going to be a hard thing to stomach at first. And, you need to be ready for some possible, kind of crazy emotions. I can attest that, they may very well happen. But she may be kind of into it too. She may just not know it, So giving, ask those questions, ask the hard-hitting questions, and it may blossom over time. You never know.
It's important to be true to yourself at the end.
Yeah,
of the day.
it definitely is.
Because if you're not true to yourself, then anything you have with anyone else isn't really true either.
And if she asks you to be untrue to yourself in that way, it's probably not.
Yeah, it's probably not a good thing.
Yes.
I mean, if you're in a situation with a partner who is not very vocal about what their limits are, because my boyfriend and I are both into BDSM, but he doesn't really he never says stop, and I don't know if he's comfortable or not, and that makes me uncomfortable because I don't know if I'm being a rapist at that point in time. And
communication is the spice of life.
So I have this issue with my partner. He says, you can do whatever you want to me. I'll say the safe word. It'll be okay. And you get into it and you're like, are we sure we're still on the okay track? Some partners
turning purple.
Some partners just aren't vocal, and you just have to, I personally like a cooling down period after I've had a moment with my partner in the BDSM context. I either give it like a couple hours or a day, depending on how I feel. And I like to say, okay, well, how do you feel about that? Did you like that I did this? Did you not like this? Like, you have to check up afterwards. Did I go too far when I did X, Y, Z? I feel like that would be the best thing. If he's not responding to you during whatever you're doing, you might check in with him afterwards, because he might just be processing what's going on. I think that's probably what's the best thing.
So it's actually really, if there are no more questions, we've got a couple minutes left. And I would like to thank our panelists for a very informative discussion. You guys are awesome, and thank you for...